cutting is a quilting term that sounds pretty mysterious, but all it really means is cutting a piece of fabric for your quilt block with the particular part of quilt showing in that piece of fabric. I'm making an I Spy baby quilt, and an I Spy quilt is a quilt that you can play a game with the baby where you and the child or baby say, "I spy with my little eye," and you pick out a little picture on the quilt and the other person has to find it. So I have my supplies here. I'll need a cutting stick, a rotary cutter, some freezer paper that I've cut in exactly into 3-inch squares, which are the size of my cut squares. Freezer paper has a waxy coating on one side, and we'll get to that later. My novelty fabric, and you can see that I've already begun cutting my novelty fabric. I've cut a couple of pieces out. A template made specifically for my I Spy quilt. You can download this template from my website, www.colfaxcloth.com, and it's a free download. You want to make sure that you print this template on heavy paper, and you want to make sure that you print it at actual size so that when you cut these windows out, this window is exactly 3 inches and this window is exactly 2.5 inches. I also have an ironing board and a cutting mat. You can use scissors instead of a rotary cutter, and I'll show you how to do that too. Okay, and an iron. I forgot to mention an iron. First, you want to go ahead and iron your fabric so it's nice and flat. Now I'm going to take my folded template, and you notice I have the smaller square on top, and I'm going to pick, this looks like a good fish here, and I would like that fish to look like this when I finish sewing the block. Now, holding on to the bottom part of the template, I open it up. I take my freezer paper, making sure the waxy side is down, and I carefully line it up right in that window. With a warm iron, I iron the paper, the freezer paper down. Now I can move the template and finish ironing that freezer paper down. I'm going to do a couple of them. Let's go ahead and find another one. Here's a nice yellow fish. Once again, I hold the paper template down, I open it up, and here's another piece of freezer paper. If you accidentally iron the freezer paper to your iron, you can clean it off using salt, but I advise trying not to do that. Okay, and I could do as many pieces as I wanted to at this stage, but for today's demonstration I'm just going to do these two. Okay, now I'm going to use the rotary cutter. I'm going to carefully align the edge of the cutting guide with the paper and just cut around all 4 sides. Fussy cutting. Here's my piece of fabric, and as you can see, this is reusable. I can use this piece of freezer paper over and over again by just peeling it away from the fabric. And there's my Fussy Cut fish. You could use scissors to cut this out if you're not set up to use a rotary cutter. Just by carefully cutting right around the freezer paper. You can see that. Just being as careful as I can. It's probably a little bit less accurate than a rotary cutter, but you should use what you feel comfortable with. Okay. Now, my I Spy quilt is going to, each of these blocks is going to be set into a lattice of sandy colored fabric. This is the fabric I've chosen for my lattice. And I've cut this fabric into strips. These are 1 3/4 inch strips. So my lattice will be, my finished lattice, I'll use a 1/4 inch seam on either side, so my finished lattice will be 1 1/4 inches wide. And what I'm going to do is to cut mini strips of this. I think 13 strips that are 45 inches by 1 3/4. And then I'm going to cut some of those strips up into 3-inch lengths. I'm going to put them right sides to my squares, stitch using a 1/4 inch seam, which I'm then going to press. I'm going to press the seam, I think I'm going to press the seam towards my I Spy block. Like this. Then I'm going to check the size on this. If the size is not right, it could cause problems later, and I may want to redo that. This isn't really the best. Here is 0 on my, I'm pretty good here. I am at 4 1/4 inches, which is right where I want to be. Okay, that's it for this episode. Watch back for the next episode on fussy cutting and the I Spy quilt.